Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Thank everyone who's online for being with us as well tonight as we convene this meeting of the Massey Commission. I'm Jerry Cruz, and tonight I'll be performing the duties of presiding chair of this meeting. The first order of business is to approve the minutes, or to examine the minutes, I should say, of our previous meeting that are in your packet. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Motion. A motion to approve by Veronica and a second by Brianna. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. Now I'll ask the commissioners serving as work group leaders to present a verbal report of the recent gatherings or any announcements that they might have. First, Sunshine Clemens, law enforcement, hiring, training, wellness, and cultural competency.
Thank you, Jerry. Our work group met on July the 7th. We had a presentation from Sheriff Crouch and talked with her regarding her concerns with the previous resolution that we sent up, and talked about some potential changes in order to sort of come to a middle ground where there would actually be some movement on that resolution. And also she presented on changes that she's implemented since she's been in office. We also discussed the Yale work group reports and ideas for our final last two meetings that we have coming up in August and September. Our next meeting will be August the 4th at 5:30 at Lincoln Library. It will be in the multipurpose room on the second floor. And I do have an announcement about an upcoming event that I would like to make the community aware of as well. There was a listening session organized by the Department of Justice back in the fall that happened at Union Baptist Church. At that meeting, there was a lot of feedback from the community that was presented, and several community groups, along with the mayor and the police, have been meeting consistently since that meeting, and we'll be holding a public meeting on July 28th, which is 1 week from today, at Southeast High School. So we want to invite the community out to attend that and hear the outcome of the work that has happened since that listening session took place in the fall of last year. And it will be at 5 o'clock. I'm sorry.
July 28th.
Thank you.
Thanks. Brian Wojcicki, Integrated Mental Health Services and Emergency Response.
So our meeting this month focused on youth mental health. In particular, we heard from the State Board of Education, and I presented notes from a meeting I had with the superintendent at District 186, covered obviously from the state and local level, the state policies from mental health to bullying to suicide to school resource officers, and then dug down more specifically in terms of what District 186 is doing. I would encourage anyone to check our minutes of the mental health group. We've been trying to keep as detailed minutes as possible of every agency and organization that we've heard from. Our August meeting is to be determined, and we'll post that as soon as we know. The reality is the next two meetings are going to focus on actually doing the work of getting the recommendations fine-tuned. So that's realistically, we're probably done with presentations at this point. But if anybody wants to be there, my plan is to go through the probably 30 to 40 pages of minutes that we have. It won't be fun, but it will be certainly substantive if anybody wants to attend.
Brian, you'll make it fun, I think.
What's that?
You'll make it fun.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, Bob Wesley, Community Education, Public Health and Safety. Is that who's that supposed to be, actually? Did Kristen, Bob, your name is, I'm sorry about that. Kristen, you've got the floor.
It's okay. He's a good person to be confused for, so, yeah.
Right.
The Community Education on Public Health and Safety Work Group last met on Saturday, June 28th at 2 p.m. at the CAP 1908 building. The meeting primarily focused on the schedule of events for July, honoring Sonia Massey and recognizing the July 6th one-year anniversary of her death. Events that were discussed included Healing Circles, Levitt Amp concert dedication, the balloon release, bridge dedication, and the Sunday Fun Day event. The committee also organized community actions such as wearing purple throughout the month and planting purple flowers. A big thank you to all who hosted the events and have remembered Sonia and her family during the month of July. The next work group meeting will be this weekend on Saturday at CAP 1908 at 2 p.m.
Thank you very much. Veronica Espina, Economic Disparities, Serviceability, Accessibility.
Yeah, so we met on Monday the 7th at Resource 1. Our regular time is 6 p.m. for the first Monday of the month. And we are on the final stages of drafting recommendations. We're also trying to write at the same time the final report. With the one caveat that we had experts invited some time ago to a meeting that didn't work because I think it was at a time that we were sick. So these experts who are, let me tell you who they are. Karen Davis and Dr. Jackie Newman, who are housing experts, are coming to the next meeting on August 4th, again, Resource 1 at 6 p.m. And we decided to split these 6 fields that we're working on, including housing, within the work group committee members that are working on different areas of recommendation and policy recommendation. So it's going well, and we're just looking forward to that meeting on August 4th.
Thank you. And thanks for all the information that you gave in those reports. Kristen, what? Yeah, Bob, it was a great report, as a matter of fact. So Kristen mentioned all of the events that were held to commemorate the death of Sonia Massey and the anniversary of her death on July the 6th. Obviously this year we've started off the work of generational work to address, well, the issues that we're getting to now and the recommendations that are going to be coming for the work group. Kristen also mentioned all of the various events that occurred, the balloon release, the Sonia Massey Bridge dedication, the Sunday Fun Day, the Healing Circles, the Levitt Amp concert that honored her. And we thank all of the commissioners and all in the audience who helped with those things and came to honor her memory and have committed themselves to justice in the community. So thanks very much for that. So the next agenda are the 2 items on the agenda are the 2 presentations for tonight. First, we have MOSAIC partnerships, and the presenters can make their way up here and take these 2 seats. Spanning 9 months, the MOSAIC Partnerships Program is meticulously designed to facilitate personal growth and communal healing. Participants embark on a journey through dialogue dinners, group activities, and large group gatherings, each phase crafted to promote reflection, conversation, and collaboration. This intentional structure ensures a comprehensive approach to bridging divides, creating an enduring impact on individuals and communities alike. The members of the commission have the biographies in your packet, and I'll share a little bit about that. So is it just,
Anthony Hamilton.
it's just going to be you, Anthony?
Ken's on the Zoom.
Oh, Ken's on Zoom. Okay, so I'll introduce both of you. So joining us from MOSAIC Partnerships are Anthony Hamilton and Kenn Burke to share with us how their organization seeks to plan, design, manage, and advocate for stronger relationships among diverse communities. Anthony Hamilton serves as Senior Procurement Specialist for Central Management Services, where he oversees requests for proposals to secure vital services for the state of Illinois. Outside of his professional work, Anthony is a dedicated community advocate. His leaderships include serving on the steering committees for downtown Springfield and the Medical District Master Plan and for Next 10's Next Fest. He also plays a key role on the Levitt Amp Springfield Music Series Concert Committee, helping to manage field operations and guest relations since 2024. Kenn Burke recently moved to Rochester from Brooklyn, New York. Kenn is a professional fundraiser and community organizer with a strong background in the operational field, having spent the last decade supporting nonprofit NGOs to achieve their goals. Kenn has brought his expertise to Idea Connection Systems Incorporated, ICS, to assist in directing the Office of Operational Innovation. Anthony and Kenn, thank you for joining us and giving of your time for the Massey Commission this evening. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. Too close.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to give you a little background on the MOSAIC partnerships and who we represent. Our goal is building allies by leveraging commonalities, differences, and strengths. We're focused on the program that we want to roll out here in Springfield, Illinois. The program's been active since 2002, originally with Rochester, then we moved to Greensboro, North Carolina. From there, we went over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a couple of years, and we're entering our 5th year in Topeka, Kansas. So they just wrapped up a program that had 60 adults and 30 teens in their program, and so that's pretty much where things are at right now. But this is who we are and what we're representing. Kind of back in 2020, this was like nationwide news. Everybody was impacted by all the things, and for the first time in a long time, there was an unprecedented commentary by whites joining in and trying to respond to what was happening in the black community, and so we saw great precedents that had not occurred for quite a long time. And so this is kind of how we are now looking at realities for today. So on an average, when we look at just the possibility of going into jail within your lifetime period, for a white individual, there's a 1 in 23 chance that they'll end up in the prison system. Whereas in the black community, there's a 1 in 4 chance that individual will work up in the prison system. And so this is something that is America's dilemma, and we're trying to address that. Coming locally here to Springfield, so I moved here to Springfield about 5 years ago during the pandemic in April of 2020, and saw a lot of things in the community and felt like I needed to be a part of addressing things that I felt needed to be addressed. And so one of those things is just looking at just what the median income is for a black community, black household is about $33,000. For a white household, it's about $80,000. And then when we look at the poverty rate, and these are all numbers that was taken from the Illinois Times as an update to the previous information that was provided. So now there's a 40% poverty rate among blacks here in Springfield, where it's at 11% for whites here in Springfield. So there's clearly a need for things to be addressed, things to be worked on, and things to do so in a productive and unified way. And it's kind of what we're trying to do and accomplish here in MOSAIC. So just looking at the stats here in Springfield, are there more need for interracial relationships to actually affect change? And so it's just not a matter of learning the information, it's about becoming an ally to the information and bringing about change to an effect in that nature. So here's a typical cycle of how things work. A lack of trust continues to exist between whites and people of color. It creates negative thoughts and stereotypes. This leads to stifling the development of interracial relationship. If I don't trust you, why would I want to befriend you? And then it prevents meaningful discussions on race and much less solutions. And so it's just like this circle of negativity that continues to grow and fester, and we can't get beyond that. We can't get to a stage where we start actually building allyship. So Chris Rock had this really statement that he made just off the fly, being Chris Rock. All my black friends have a bunch of white friends, and all my white friends have one black friend. And everybody laughed at it, criticized him, talked about it, and you know, but in reality, when stats are actually done nationwide and pulled together, Chris Rock really wasn't that far off in his commentary. So you look at the average white American, they have about one black friend, one Latino friend, one Asian friend, one mixed race friend, and one race person of another race. So you look at the average black American, they have 8 white friends, 2 Latinos, typically no Asians, 3 mixed races, 1 other race friends. And so this is a stat. So Chris made a joke about it, but then the stats actually show that he wasn't that far off. The typical white American really has limited interaction with people of color in the community, whether they are black, whether they're Latino, whether they're listed as Asian. So there needs to be a way to increase that. And so this is kind of what MOSAIC is partnering and trying to accomplish. You know, we have a strong history of race amity and collaboration here in America. You know, the creation of the Underground Railroad during the times of slavery, collaboration during the Civil Wars to try and end slavery for good, and first Universal Race Congress, and then Topeka, Kansas, with the Board of Brown versus the Board of Education. So there's been a strong, and then the civil rights movements of the 1960s. We can now add, you know, almost in a sense, the movements here going on in the 2020s and 2025s, where people are gathering in the street and making a statement and saying, hey, we want to see and bring about change in our specific community, as well as here in Springfield. So MOSAIC's approach is a very positive approach to how we address this. We don't villainize anybody, we don't create shame, we don't create guilt. We include behavioral guidance based on common understanding. And then we try and focus on the foundation of everything that MOSAIC do is building trust. Once we build that trust, then it allows for these high sensitive topic of race to be discussed. And then it also allows for strong interracial friendships. And we'll go over this as we continue to look at the information. So our goal, again, for MOSAIC Partnership, and especially here in Springfield, Illinois, the state capital, is to create allies through trusting partnerships. We want people to learn how to trust one another, but not just trust one another to like be aware of each other's space and existence, but actually become partners in bringing about systemic change to our community, which desperately needs it and desperately wants it. So how we match our partners is something that's very unique to what we do. Typically, I've been involved in multiple organizations. I was involved with Be the Bridge, to the church that I go to, Hope Church. And so typically, when people are partnered together, they are kind of meeting for the first time. There's no background or information on them. With MOSAIC, before you actually become a partner, we go about this through a very systemic way. First, there's a psychometric instrument that's utilized. So we are matching your personalities based on your psychological profile, based on demographic information, and then we run an algorithm to pull that together. So before you actually even partner together, you are actually working and sitting across somebody that thinks like you, acts like you, responds like you, processes like you, at a high level of trust. And it has to be at a minimum of 50%. If there's not a 50% match through this algorithm and through this survey, we don't partner you. So you would come on the sidelines and wait for somebody that would match your personality, match your demographics and everything else. So we want you to start off looking as if you're looking in the mirror at somebody that just happens to be in a different body and a different coloration than you are. So this is kind of what makes MOSAIC very unique and allows us to be very successful. The partners meet a minimum of twice a month, and they meet socially in pairs, and then they also work in cluster groups. We also bring coaches into this process. So we have a 7-month program here in Springfield that we are rolling out. So not only are you building relationships with each other as partners, but then you're being coached by people who are trained to do what they're doing and teach you how to get to that next level. So the first level of trust typically is around 61% when it's one-on-one. You and me getting to know one another on a personal, in a family level and everything else. But then we bring a coach into that process as well to kind of increase that opportunity for you to really bond and grow. And the coach teaches you things that you may not or may not be aware of through these cluster meetings and everything else. So this is basically what we're trying to do to effectively create a long-term relationship. So again, like I said earlier, it's like looking and talking into a mirror. This individual, through this match-in, looks like you, responds like you, takes risks like you, processes like you, and it's all these things kind of match together, and this is what builds that trust level for a lifetime. Because you start off with somebody that already is 50% just like you as far as the processing. Program's been run in Rochester, New York, and so we ask a hall question at the end of all our sessions. So this individual, and again, on an average, the program is about 9 months long. We want a 7-month program here in Springfield. We feel it's important to kind of speed up the process a little bit. and get things moving along. But we asked the hard question. At the end of 9 months, you just met an individual for the first time. What is your trust level with this individual? Do you trust this individual as much as you trust your closest friend? So on an average in Rochester, 82% of the people said, I trust this stranger that I just met 9 months ago at an 82% level. Greensboro was 89, Milwaukee 85, Milwaukee the second year was 81, Topeka was about 48%, and then the second year they're at 44%. So we're still gathering information for Topeka for 2023 and 2024. Topeka just actually wrapped up their MOSAIC program for this year in May. But we'll have that information. But what this does is you're more than likely to stay involved in this individual's life. Because if you trust your closest partner and your closest friend, you don't disappear from their life. You go through life's experiences, you get involved in what makes them happy, you get involved in what makes them sad, you get interactive into their lives. And so when there's this kind of a trust level, individuals tend to stay connected for a lifetime. They stay involved in each other's life. So like I said, the program was rolled out in Topeka in 2021. They're now in their 5th year. So there's a lot of information that's available at the Topeka website. It's called Topeka United. So if you wanted to kind of exactly see what's going on in Topeka, how that's all playing out, and how that's working out. So why Topeka? Topeka really is aggressively going after trying to get people to move into their community. And so they realize that if we're going to get people involved in each other's lives, we have to deal with the racial issues that are currently there. So Topeka right now, as of 2025 stats, there's about 124,000 people that live in Topeka, almost 125,000. Topeka's population is about 66.1% white and 10.2% black. And that was in 2022. Currently, right now, in 2025, Topeka has a 70.96% white population and a 9.67% black population. 66.1% are listed as other, and the Asian population in Topeka is about 1.8%, and the Native American population is less than 1% in Topeka. So we look at Springfield and we look at Topeka, which is bigger than Springfield, and we see how they've spent the last 5 years addressing racial relationships. And they've been very, very successful in making that happen. So the median income in Topeka is about $55,000, and the poverty rate in Topeka is about 15.56. So again, all this information is readily available on the Topeka United website for you to follow up on. They've graduated about 150 people out of their program. And so 150 people have been involved in each other's lives and building this level of trust and staying connected and involved. Topeka then took it to another level. They said, this is working great for adults, but if we really want to start impacting people for the future, let's get our teens involved. And so they started pulling in teens. So they actually started running a teen program, and they're in the 3rd year of running the teen program. And so they got about 30 partners out of this last year, which again ended on May 7th of this year. Their program ran from August 24th to May 7th. So they're going to move forward, and they actually have open applications for teens to apply to be a part of the MOSAIC program again for 2025 to 2026. And they are taking a year off for adults at this stage for Topeka. Part of that, again, right? I said the population of the black community is about 9.67 and almost 71% white. Well, over the course of 4 years, we've kind of addressed and met with everybody in the black community. So they are taking a year off to kind of rebuild and restructure, and they're going to go back at it again in 2026. But in the meantime, not only are they taking time off, they're still running events where people can still get involved in each other's lives. So there's monthly single events from September 2025 through May of 2026. So people can, even though the program isn't going to be active for adults, in this time period, they still have all this curriculum and all these events going on because they want to keep that momentum going as they kind of move forward and get things moving along. So here's how we basically do this. We work in module. The first module is where you get to know one another. You spend time in a coffee shop, you spend time getting to know each other. Then you move from there to actually spending time with each other's families and friends. We're planting that seed of friendship because now you're involving your friends and your family in the relationship that you have with this individual. Then we deepen the trust a little bit further. We want you over the next course of towards the back end of this to actually start getting involved in each other's networks. You know, we all know that our networks make or break us, right? It's how we grow, it's how we get promotions, it's how we get income, and we build multiple things through the networks that we have the opportunity. So this program starts off with where you start to get to know each other on a personal level. We start bringing in family and friends, and then we start bringing in your network. And so as a result of this, you typically don't want to lose that relationship, so you develop this lifetime bond. You're gonna stay involved in each other's lives, you're gonna stay active in each other's lives, because you know each other on all these different levels. You know each other's friends, you know each other's families, you know who the bankers are, you know who the realtors are, all these different things. So there's a real opportunity to build long-term, not only a lifetime bond, but actually have an impact in the people of color community to where they now have access to things that typically will not have access to. And they have an advocate, as in their partner is going to be advocating with their network, with their banker, advocating with their realtor, and all these different people to try and make sure that their friend is taken care of because they trust this person and they believe in this person, and they're going to treat this person the same as they have over the course of their life with some of their closest friends. All this is laid on if everybody has this out there. If you don't, I'll get that. I think everybody here does have a copy of this. But again, this is all a map of what we plan to do here in Springfield over the next 7 months, or through the 7-month time period that we have here. So basically, again, we have these clusters that meet. We have coaches that are working with the individuals. So again, we start off, you hang out with each other's friends and family, and then you build to the family and your friendships, and then you go to your networks and everything else. And this is kind of what makes it successful, again, because it's a lasting, long-time bond and opportunity for people of color, as well as for the Caucasian community to pull together and become allies at working together to make all this happen. Here's our governance structure. So pretty much we have our sponsors, a founder. We have a champions group, which is our kind of our steering committee. For here in Springfield, I will be on that steering committee. Catherine Harris will also be as part of that steering committee. We will also working with the United Way, who's going to be our local fiduciary partner. And so they will have somebody on staff that will also be on that steering committee. And then Bob Rosenfeld, who's pretty much created the MOSAIC partnership, will also be in that steering committee. We want it to be evenly matched between male and female, white and people of color. And so that's kind of how we structured our steering committee. Then from there, we will pull together an advisory group and invite a lot of people. We're currently partnered with the Community Foundation for the Land of Lincoln here in Springfield. We're also partnered with the Sangamon County Growth Alliance as part of the people that are backing us and trying to help us get this program instituted and moving along. So we're going to be pulling people from and putting them on an advisory board. Idea Connections is basically what allows us to have that proprietary algorithm that allows us to match your demographics as well as your psychometric information and pull together into those partnerships. And then the ICS team is pretty much all that kind of combined together. We'll have a community coordinator, and we're currently in the process of trying to secure that individual to be here in Springfield. I've talked to UIS and the chancellor, and what we're trying to do is get a fellows grant, a graduate student to basically who's interested in impacting their community to be training under this partner or this coordinator, so that hopefully in 2 years time period, they can raise up and become full-time, and they become a coordinator, and then they start recruiting. And so that's what we're working on in the process of trying to coordinate right now. But we will have an individual, which we'll reveal at a point in time in the future, who will actually be on the ground. Why do we need a coordinator? Because this is my passion. This is what I want to see, and we'll work until my dying breath to accomplish here. But I work full-time for the state. That's my full-time job. That's where my pension's tied up. That's where a lot of different things are going on. And I'm not going to put that at risk. So what I currently have worked out with my bosses is anytime that I have anything to deal with MOSAIC that's within my working hours, I will take personal time off. And I will continue to do that because I really feel that this is a program that will address so many different issues here, both with healthcare, with wellness, with the police force and reformations and different things that need to address. And part of that is we are asking and have requested, I met with the mayor and I've requested that 10 police officers and their chief of police become a part of what we're trying to do here and accomplish in the first year for MOSAIC. We have a 5-year plan for MOSAIC. That first year, we want to get at least 10 officers from the city and their chief of police. We are, and this will be the ask that you'll see later on, we're hoping that the county will join in as well. That they'll send their chief of police, and they'll also put 10 officers into this program, and we'll train and teach these officers how to have true, deep, trusting, long-time, life-bonding relationships with individuals in the community they serve. So that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish and bring about. Again, we're going to have coaches. Coaches will be receiving a stipend because they're putting a lot of time in training these individuals. And then we have the partners who we match and pair together based on that algorithm that we come up with. So this is very hard to see, but everything I just explained is pretty much what it is everything is structured, it all falls into place. So you're not just left out there on your own as a partner. You have coaches, you have coordinators, you have the community, you have team members, you have all these people in your corner fighting to make sure that you are successful in graduating out of this program, but also in maintaining that lifetime bond and relationship, which is very important. So again, MOSAIC started back in 2000 by Mayor Bill Johnson in Rochester. It was called at that time Biracial Partnerships. Then in Greensboro, it got the name MOSAIC Partnerships. Had 2 successful runs in Milwaukee. MOSAIC, that algorithm that we utilize is pretty much deployed in corporations, or whether that's ExxonMobil, Hallmark, Frito-Lay. So they use, and also for the military, as they're trying to pair individuals together, they want to make sure that the team is going to be as successful as possible. So they match them personality-wise so that they have a greater, higher success of working together in a productive way at their jobs. And so again, it's in its 4th cycle in Topeka. They're actually entering their 5th cycle right now, and they have incorporated students in that program. So what is MOSAIC asking for? What we're asking from the Massey Commission is to help us. We hope that you will recommend that both the Sangamon County and the chief and the City of Springfield police officers will actually get involved in our program at a true heart level. We want them to become partners in that first year of the MOSAIC program. We have a 5-year plan to roll this out. The first 2 years will be covered by MOSAIC partnerships, and then we're going to need to do what's known as create a Springfield United group. It will become its own nonprofit so that it can continue to work such as in Topeka United is doing. Again, they're in their 5th year. We'd love to see this go way beyond 5 years for Springfield and have a lasting impact in systemic things that need to change here and that we want to see and be a part of that change process. So that's basically what we're asking for the Master Commission. That's our ask. For the general public, we're asking you to come on board and work with us and do what we're doing. Give monetary donations to our partnership program here in Springfield, volunteer as a coach or as a partner, and then we're also asking corporations to become corporate sponsors to what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish here in Springfield. That's it.
Okay, does Ken want to say anything?
Ken, you're up.
Sure. Thank you very much. By the way, fantastic job.
Yeah, I agree.
Well done. So I have been the interim program manager for the MOSAICs program for approximately 3.5, going on 4 years now. I have successfully ran the program with Topeka United for 3.5 years. I've seen a lot of positivity come out on the back end of each of the cohorts that we've ran. But something I'd like to point out is not only are we creating fantastic bonds and relationships that have the potential to last a lifetime in Topeka as we speak, but I live in a town where it was created and it has not been ran in quite some time. So it's one of my personal goals is to get the program ran in Rochester again. And in doing so, I've been reaching out to a lot of the alumni. These are people that were in the program in 2001, 2002, 2003. And I think that it's an interesting factoid here that they are all now leaders in this community. I do not think that it is a coincidence. Our now current mayor, Malik Evans, a partner. His partner, professor at IRT, Rochester Institute of Technology, they still stay in touch with each other. City Councilman Wade Norwood here in Rochester partnered up with Danny Wegman of Wegman Supermarkets. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the brand, but it's been pretty popular here on the East Coast and in particular New York for quite some time. Two men who have for the last 20 years created that bond in 2001 and continue to do work in the Department of Education here in Rochester. These are bonds that were created 21 years ago and still exist today. These ladies and gentlemen are still working hand in hand with each other in their own communities. And that's because, as Anthony so eloquently put, they were able to take the tool that we provide in the beginning, the ISPI, the psychometric tool, and match people so well through the use of the tool and the demographic that it accelerates that bonding trust, and we can do what sometimes it takes years to do between people and do it in a 7 to 9 month period. And I think we can all agree we have all been to and been part of DEI efforts throughout our lives. Sometimes it's the week away DEI with your HR. Sometimes it's Thursday and Friday. But I can go out on a limb and ask by a show of hands in this room tonight, how many people have involved themselves with the help of a partner in DEI work for 9 months? And I would suffice to say, the work done on the partner level is very strong. We walk them hand in hand through a process. In the beginning, these partners are asked to create a covenant. What is shared between the partners stays between the partners. Same thing goes for the cohorts when they're in larger groups. But I think that is the basis. And they're given 100 questions to ask each other over the course of 7 months. Those questions start off very innocuous. Do you have brothers and sisters? Where were you born? By the time you're 4 or 5 months into the program, those questions now have weight. Have you been involved in a racial incident? How did it affect you? And at the same time, these questions are being asked of each other in the partner setting at the, like Anthony said, at the coffee shop or out to lunch or dinner, or eventually at my house when I introduce my partner to my family. And it enables the partners themselves to go around a circle of trust a few times, learn enough about the person that they now realize they have a trusting bond. They enter a second circle where social capital starts being shared. And it's that sharing of social capital that makes this program entirely different than anything I've ever done before. Because now we can go out into the community and do the work together, right? I have your back, you have mine. I have your network, you have my network. I've been to your church, I've been to your job, I've introduced you to the people that are important in my life that can help us in our endeavors. This creates alumni of the program that will continuously put their best foot forward in the community and continue to work in each other's communities. I suggest it's the same as Anthony did. If anybody has the opportunity, visit Topeka United's website. There's a couple of videos on that website, partners being interviewed by local radios and podcasts and on TV, some of which they're explaining what they intend to do after the program, some of the projects that they're taking on in Topeka. Very powerful work. Also, Anthony mentioned that Topeka's taking a year off. They're taking a year off from doing the program, but the alumni of the program from the previous 3-4 years now are in the communities doing their own projects. This is some of what you'll see on their website. Very powerful work. I'm proud to be part of it. If anybody has any questions that I can answer in relation to the use of the psychometric tool and the algorithm, which is what I do believe is a unique part of the program. People have run this program with us before, ladies and gentlemen, and tried to do it without the matching with the tool and the demographic, and it does not turn out the same. And so I highly suggest that we take a chance and we run the program as Anthony has explained it to you, with your help and with the help of the other organizations Anthony has rounded up. I do believe you stand a very strong chance to create actual systemic change in your own communities by getting people like the mayor involved, getting police officers and the chief involved, getting the fire department involved, getting the groups of people together that generally would not find themselves sitting at the same table, and letting them go through this 7-month program and coming out the other end better people for it, and not only better as individuals, but better as partners, better in groups, real anti-racists. I think it's powerful work, and I'd love to share it in your own community.
Thank you.
So one last thing
Sure, yeah.
to wrap up. So again, part of why I am working with MOSAIC is, and I hope everybody kind of remembers this, but the Next 10 was something that was created here in our community to try and have an impact. And one of the things that was listed was community-led reinvestment in the East Side. This is what I feel is our solution, or one of the things to help with that community reinvestment in the East Side, because you're doing that social capital, you're doing that bond level with the police force and with the people that can have a positive or negative impact on the communities that are here on the east side of Springfield. So I'll leave this for people to see. And then I also brought the actual book that the partners are actually going to be using. So it has all the questions that they're going through. It has all that information available. So I'll leave that for people to see as well. And I'll take any questions at this time.
Sure. Any questions or comments from the commissioner for Anthony or Ken? Susan first.
Hello, Mr. Hamilton.
Hello, Reverend Susan.
You and I are friendly. I'm not sure if we're friends
Yes.
yet.
I would say we're
We're
getting there.
friends? All right, we're getting there.
I come to your events, you come to mine.
We haven't been to dinner at each other's houses yet. We're working on it,
Yes,
I
we
suppose.
are.
And so I'm going to say some things now
Sure.
that I have said to you personally. So I want to make sure everybody else knows. You've heard me say these things before.
Yes, I have.
And you and I have different approaches.
Yes. And
So for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to reiterate those so we have another frame as well. One thought that came to me actually was where I was asked to start when I was part of a panel discussion in this community a couple of years ago on race relations. This was my intro. This was my invitation to speak. And it's from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. So this is something that to which I hold myself accountable. I don't know if I'm a white moderate. I might not be so moderate. I am white. So some of the things I've said to you before, I will say again. I don't think niceness equals social change. I can be the nicest white lady in the world. It doesn't mean you get adequate pain management in the emergency room. I don't think friendship equals justice. I know from many conversations just this week that I've had that I would say probably every person of color I know has been wounded by a white friend who may not have even recognized it, or may have recognized it and didn't think it was a big deal and dismissed it. that friendship doesn't equal justice, which is key to this commission's work. One of the challenges that I have with the MOSAIC program, and you and I talked about this when our church hosted an informational session that you were doing with the community, was I don't see anywhere in here that there's an acknowledgement of systemic racism. That racism is not an individual event. It's not about me being racist. It's about how we all exist in systems which privilege people in certain categories and penalize and harm people in other categories. And I don't see that in this program. And when I listen again, one of my deep concerns about the frame that, as it's presented, is that it seems to center white comfort. We don't want to scare the white folks, and ignores the harm and death caused by systems of injustice by communities of color. For instance, when we met with some of the physicians from the medical school who had done the deep demographic work, there are communities in this town whose neighborhoods in this town, blocks in this town, whose life expectancy is 20 years less than other neighborhoods in town. I don't know how we solve that. I suspect it's gonna take a lot of things, but my concern is that I don't see it addressed here. And I say this with appreciation for all the work you do, and I think white people would do well to have more diverse friends. And I know that white folks hurt people of color every day, who are their friends, who are their family. Becoming anti-racist, I think, requires something beyond this, something in addition to this. And so thank you for doing the work. Thank you for building relationships, because we need them. This city is so divided that it's painful to see, but it's more painful for some of us than others. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. So I will address that, and part of the reason why this book is here is we do get into the anti-racism. We do deal with these personal questions. We do look at local Springfield information, such as what we presented earlier on. We make sure that we're actively dealing with that community's elephant in the room, if you want to utilize that word. And so we do deal, and MOSAIC is an anti-racist program. We just have a different approach than a lot of programs that are currently out there. But we are still very effective with that. And so, but we are an anti-racist program, and again, look at the questions, look at what's being asked, look at how deeply we go into it. That's part of why the book is here. So these partners, you get to see exactly what these partners have to deal with. So we're all going to address things that need to be changed in here in Springfield. We're all going to address the fact that there are systemic things, whether it's at the police force, the traffic stops that we just learned about last month. All these things will be dealt with and looked at. So we're not, when we say we're not villainizing somebody, we're saying let's do the work together. And we feel that this isn't a very effective way of doing that. So yes, MOSAIC is an anti-racist program, and that is the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. But again, look at the actual questions, please, and see how deep and impersonal we get.
If I may add to that, Anthony?
Yeah.
If you take a gander at the timeline that Anthony provided in the presentation he made, some of the materials addressed in the early modules and cohorts are a lot more lighthearted than the materials at the end of the program, and in particular more towards the center of the program, month 4, 5, and 6. Systemic racism on the grand scale is addressed from the American point of view, from scratch to where we find ourselves today. So much like Anthony said, if you'd be so kind, please do take a gander at the materials in front of you and realize that I definitely hear the point of view you brought to the table this afternoon. But I think that if you sat with someone who was willing to be honest with you for 7 months on this topic, both by yourselves and with others, talking about the same and doing the exercises that's necessary to bring a lot of that to the forefront. A lot of the Caucasian participants, not just realizing, not just admitting to having privilege, but seeing it and how it affects their partner and their families and their communities, and then sitting in that and continuing to do the hard work for months on end. I think you'll find that there is some real substance to this program. Yeah, I think it's easy to paint it from a very cheerful perspective. I mean, the name of the program is the MOSAIC program, right? It just sounds kind of happy, and I hear that. But we do the hard work that is necessary to create bonds between people like doctors and policemen and the community leaders that otherwise would not create these friendships on their own, and partnered with people who wouldn't necessarily reach out to those individuals either. One of the greatest relationships I've seen come out of Topeka recently was a young lady who got paired with a police officer, and right after the pairing made a request to us to unpair them because that person was a police officer. I understand. Something happened in that person's life that affected them to the point where they did not want to be paired with a police officer. They are now coaches for the Topeka program. They have not only went through the program, created that bond of trust, become partners in their community, but they've returned to the program because they believe that it worked for both of them. I would ask that you take some time with the material for yourself. And I invite you to join the program when we run it in your community.
Okay.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions or comments? Sunshine, and then Margarita after that.
I've got a couple of questions, so I'm just going to ask and then let you answer. Some of them are just logistical. But why is Springfield 7 months where other places are 9 months?
We're trying to advance the program here, right? So from my perspective, being here for 5 years, I feel, one, what the Massey Commission is doing and what others before the Massey Commission continue to do, such as yourself, we feel like we really need to get this going as much as possible. So with our 5-year plan, if we can get it down to 7 months, within that 5-year period, we can have 300 people going through this program. So we're trying to advance the number of people going through the program within that 5-year time period by shortening it by 2 months. And we're not losing anything per se. We're still using the same format, the same questioning, the same anti-racism, and then the same deep bond and everything else. But we're trying to increase the number of people going through the program here in Springfield because we feel like it needs to be addressed. The time is now at Springfield.
Okay, thank you. And then do you have any information or any theories on why the trust percentage out of Topeka was so much lower than the other areas?
Yeah, and I'll leave that to Ken.
Take it away, Ken.
Yeah. Well, part of the issue with working with Topeka has been struggling to find partner pairs through the process. Like Anthony mentioned a little while ago, the population there is such a disparity. There's been some repeat process with a couple of people, and a few partnerships have broken up. Also, another reason, and this will reflect back to the question you just asked, why 7 as opposed to 9, is we have found over the course of my tenure here that 9 months of this program, with 2 modules in there that basically repeat and are open-ended conversation modules, they can be condensed into the previous or module afterwards, and there's less time to be spent. I have personally noticed as the program manager that sometime around month 7, month 8, there's a lot of fatigue A lot of this information can wear on people, especially if they're getting involved on a pretty steep incline and going out and trying to be involved. And plus, life happens to a lot of people, parents and kids in school. It's why Topeka ran it in the months that they did last time. They were trying something different. Uh, they've done some experimental work that has kind of created a few stats that are askew. But again, I I I can't say it any more vehemency. Please take the opportunity to visit their website and see some of the partnerships for yourself. The work is done and it's effective. I couldn't put my thumb on 100%, but I will say that there are surveys that are given out throughout the year, which work off of the original demographic that we asked in the beginning. After the first 2 months, we'll run another survey and we'll get all of the participants in the cohort setting to answer a much shorter survey. And then we create a report out of that. And we do so 2 months again later, and we do so at the end, a final report. And it's in those final reports that we see the question is asked, how do you feel about your partner in relation to other relationships that you have? And that's when we feel the data turn into real usable statistics. Topeka, they've struggled with some of what they're doing because they are also trying to do some pretty innovative things with the program. Like Anthony mentioned before, getting the teenagers involved was a new endeavor for both ICS and Topeka, and I think that kind of has skewed the numbers as well.
Okay, thanks. Sunshine, did you have anything else?
I do.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you for that. Anthony, you mentioned that if a person is not matched, they would like wait for another one. How often does that happen, and how long, if they're not matched, like how long do they sit waiting? Like, is there a point where you're just like, okay, we can't find you anyone, or what does that look like?
So again, that's why we have a 5-year plan, and we're shortening it down to 7 months. So you're waiting basically a 7-month time period to be back involved in the program. But before the program ends, the current one ends, we're starting the process for the next season. We're putting it out, the application, so that we can hopefully find you a match for the next go around. Now, again, if we don't find you a match, it doesn't mean you can't be a coach. It doesn't mean you can't be a volunteer in other ways for helping out the program. But again, within a 7-month period, you're going to have a much more opportunity to get back in the program.
Okay. And then just two last things. One, on your graphic, what are exit slips? Is that like where people are, if it's not working for them, they are able to leave on the bottom of the graphic?
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
No. Ken,
Oh.
you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really important to check in with the participants at the end of each of these cluster meetings. The cluster meetings are once a month. We're expecting the partners to be meeting by themselves outside of the cluster setting once or twice a month. So the cluster should be their third meeting. And the exit slips ask simple questions. Has this program lived up to your expectations? What is something that you learned from this particular module that you didn't know before? Usually it's a set of about 5 questions. We ask that the exit slips are filled out in the cluster setting and then handed to the coaches before they leave, because it's in combination with those exit slips and the survey to come in 2, 4, and 6 months that we are able to garnish the data and basically create reports for the program itself. So the participants actually help with the data by filling out the exit slips at the end of each module.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, and most important to me, is can you help me understand, you've talked about how this will create systemic change. I'm not seeing, I believe that it'll create needed relationships, but I'm struggling to see how this will create systemic change by one person having one additional good friend in their life. It feels more like it would potentially create an opportunity for exceptionalism versus systemic change. So if you could, I don't know if there's examples that you all have, but just help me understand how systems are actually changing by adding one person to someone's life.
That's a great
So-
question. Hey, Ken, let me answer that, and then I'll let
Yeah,
you.
by all means.
since- So,
Yeah.
part of the whole point of when you're partnered together, before you exit in the program, you and your partner are gonna start looking at what you can do within your community to bring about systemic change. And then you and your partner make that decision. Now, the cool thing about how we have this program, we'll like say 100 people. I think we looked at potentially having 4 clusters, which is about 25 people in each of the clusters. So, or 20, we may have 5 clusters and break it down to 20. So if you and I are partnered together and we choose a topic that we want to have an impact in our community, but we realize that it's bigger than us. I now have 24 other people or 22, 23 other people within my cluster, if it's based on 25 people, that I can pull in to help me accomplish what I'm trying to do or go about systemically. And if it's bigger than the 25 of us, I have another cluster to go to. Eventually, I can get 100 people involved in trying to get this done. So the whole point is you are choosing something that's anti-racist, something that's going to impact your community based on your community's needs, and you're aggressively making a decision. And what am I going to do together with my partner? And who do I need to pull in within my cluster, within my group or partnership to help me accomplish this? So that's why we feel it's going to bring about systemic change, because it's not just you and one individual that's your friend. You're not just going through a program where you become friends. You're going through a program where you become friends and now start impacting your community. That's the whole point of the program, is you're going to bring about change in your community. Ken, I'm sorry.
Yeah, by all means, that was well said. Actually, I can give some real life examples. Our current mayor in Rochester was one of the original participants. And actually, the mayor right before him, Mayor Lovely, was also a participant. And Mayor Lovely and the then police chief, who had both went to the program, the police chief had partnered with a doctor, a psychologist, if I remember correctly, and every time an incident would occur, well, not every time, but in a couple of cases where incidents occurred in the city that warranted real attention, and a commission was put together, both of these partners would call on their previous MOSAIC partners to be on the boards to give advice for mental health in relation to mental health. Now, this is something that the police chief may have in university been privy to, but without his partner's point of view, would they have then assimilated new rules and regulations within the police department that affected how, when police officers arrive on a scene and are in the presence of someone who is having a mental health breakdown or needs mental health attention as opposed to getting the usual treatment, those rules and regulations were put in place by the police chief, who addressed the problem through having quorum with people that he had worked with in the past, one of which is his partner. So those partners, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but 5 years from now can be called on for their expertise in something that you are dealing with. It doesn't just have to be the police chief or the mayor. This happens at many different levels. It's happened at the union level in town. It's happened suffice to say, these partnerships last for a long time, and you will find some sort of social capital that your partner has that you will inevitably be able to use in a project that you can affect real systemic change to policy in your community.
Okay, Margarita?
I had several questions too.
Sure.
One thing that I observed about your presentation is that there seems to be a lack of urgency in addressing in an advocacy and activism type way, the partnerships that are formed don't seem to have a sense of urgency integrated into their relationship. It seems as if they're becoming friends and they're making alliances, and then maybe one person has high social capital and the other person has lower social capital, and the person with higher social capital is developing the one, with lower social capital. What in the program prevents the person with higher social capital from taking advantage of that power relationship?
I think that's it's part of what reality is, right? At some point in time, and part of the reason why we get the coaches involved, part of the reason why you're seeing exactly what's being discussed and how we do feel like there is a sense of urgency in what we're trying to accomplish. We really feel like we're addressing things up front and immediately. And again, this is a 7-month program. We're in 7 months time period. The relationship and beyond the social capital, we're not focusing only on social capital. That's just a byproduct of what we're trying to accomplish. But it's a much needed reality of what needs to be accomplished. So there's ways that, and again, before we kind of weed out a lot of that psychological thing with how we partner people together. Again, you're thinking a lot, you're processing a lot, you're approaching things the same way. So we're in essence, that can kind of weed out that predator, if you want. I'm going to use that word, predator, okay? And so there's all these different levels of what we're trying to accomplish to make sure that psychologically, before you even begin this process, you're really matched. And then we address all these issues over that 7-month time period, and deep issues. Again, the goal is an anti-racist program, right? We're trying to, and then it is an advocacy program, because you don't exit the program without coming up with what you're gonna do to bring about change in your community. So we feel that approach has been a healthy way to do it in the past. We're not aware, and Ken may be more aware of this since he works for ISP. I'm not aware of any things where we've had those negative predatorial situations exist before in Rochester, Greensboro, Milwaukee, or in Topeka right now. So, but we are dealing with the advocacy. We want people to be actively involved in bringing about change in their community.
And do you have any data on the efficacy of that psychometric tool that you use? Like, how good is it? How efficient? How effective is it with the parent?
As a matter of fact, we do. In the psychometric assessment realm, I think we're all familiar with the Myers-Briggs, the Firo-B, the DISC. There's several of them, and I could probably keep going. But there is an equation by the name of Cronbach's alpha. It is an equation that basically, through weighted means, takes the amount of questions we have and proves the efficacy of the results. All of the psychometric tools I mentioned before have a Cronbach alpha rating somewhere in the mid to high 70s. And as a matter of fact, the ISPI, because of the work that we do with it to measure innovativeness in our innovation work, actually has one of the highest Cronbach alpha ratings for efficacy out of any of the existing psychometric tools. Cronbach alpha is the equation itself that proves the efficacy of the tool.
Cronbach's alpha.
I wouldn't even go so far
I know
as
it
to
well.
offer.
I know my roots, I'm certified.
I'd go so far as to offer everybody in the room this evening the opportunity to take the ISPI for themselves. And if you would like personal feedback, myself, my boss, who is the founder and creator of the ISPA, would also be willing to help with that feedback. And I think you can see for yourselves how effective the tool can be, both in innovation work and our anti-racism work.
So I will jump in here and say that Catherine Harris actually took this, and
She did.
if she's comfortable sharing what she's learned from that, it might be good to see somebody live. I've actually taken it myself, but again, we wanted both Catherine and myself to go through the program. And again, Ken, we're not saying everybody in the room, we are saying the commissioners here. We're willing
yes,
to,
right.
thank
Those-
you very much.
Those which I can see in front of me, yes indeed.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm assuming there's a crowd behind you
so
that I
that you
cannot
can
see.
take it personally and see how effective this is. And, you know, well, if Catherine have the opportunity, she's comfortable in sharing what she's learned from her.
Yes.
Quick question, going back alpha is about validity.
It's about validity. It's about grouping questions into one factor. It's a type of factor analysis. And
Indeed.
you and I worked on that, as a matter of fact. We've got it in a couple of studies, so, yeah. Go.
I did indeed take the test that was referenced. And when I got the results back, I said, oh my goodness, this really is how I work, how I think, how I process. So I found it to be very useful to me.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Did you have anything else, Margarita?
I did have a couple of questions, sorry.
Okay, then we'll have, you know, I think after your questions, we'll move to the next presentation then, so.
Sure.
Unless, did you have one?
Wanted to speak on it as well.
What?
We have others.
Oh, okay, well, we'll keep going then, but just.
My
keep going.
other quick question was, are the officers willing to do the psychometric testing to be matched with Black, Indigenous, and people of color?
I can't speak to if they want to. I can tell you that I really believe that again, I can talk at the city level with the mayor in our discussion back and forth. I think she does want this program for her police force. I think it's something that she wants to institute. The 10 is a big ask because of the size of the, you know, but the big thing for us is it's got to be the chief and it's got to be the officers at the same time. And so if the mayor is pushing this with the chief of police in the city at a city level, I think this is something that will roll out. Again, we're asking help from the commission to have the same effect at the county level, obviously, because they need to be part of this program. I mean, oh my goodness, do they need to be part of this program?
Okay.
And then my last quick question is, what's your funding model for MOSAIC?
So what we are we have applied for a 2-year grant that will allow us to run the program at basically, in essence, the grant expense for the first 2 years. During that same 2-year time period, which is why we're going to have a coordinator train either a fellowship person or somebody that's an advocate in the community that wants to step into that full-time coordinator's role. The goal is by the 3rd year, this Springfield United group that needs to still be formed and will be coming out of our governance structure will actually carry the torch forward. So MOSAIC is basically, in a sense, paying for itself those first 2 years, with the goal that as we are fundraising, as we're getting corporate sponsorship, as we get people like the Community Foundation for the Land of Lincoln, as we get people like the United Way and all these other, as it becomes more and more information, people will start funding this program so it continues to grow beyond the 2 years that we are investing in making this roll out.
Veronica?
Yeah, I wanted to make a statement about how white-centered this approach appears to be, and really, for me, if these 300 years of systemic racism and white supremacy wanted to be changed by white people that want to build friendships, we would have done that already. So I think that, to me, this approach is really transactional and tokenizing, and I don't want to see a program funded in Springfield in which now I get to have a Latino friend on top of my Black friend. I want to see systemic change and institutional change, because we had a woman killed in Springfield by a police officer. We have poverty in Springfield that is not going to change because of our friendships with other people. It really needs systemic change. And yes, friendships help. But I think that we need to center here the systemic issues that affect Black, Latino people in poverty. And I cannot imagine myself thinking of how communities right now are fearing being kidnapped, being deported, and investing as person of colors in friendships with white people that may have connections to protect us. I mean, it is about changing laws and changing policy, right? So I find it to be distracting as a program instead of the systemic change that we need. And I really don't have questions. I just wanted you to hear that from me, because our communities are hurting, and they're not necessarily looking at, oh, I need to be friends with this white person so I can get a better job. What we're looking at is, I need systemic change.
Next comment, Bree.
Okay, I have a couple of questions and a statement. So first, I want to say, as a biracial individual who grew up in a household full of white people, relationships don't really determine how they're going to treat you, because the most intense form of racism, or like really racist comments I've experienced, was from family members. So I don't necessarily think that forming a relationship with somebody that doesn't know you is really going to negate the issue of systemic racism. Although I do think that this is a good idea at some point. I just don't think Springfield is at the place where this is what we're needing right now. I think the issues within Springfield are a lot deeper and heavier than just forming friendships. Another thing that I want to say is that I feel like expecting the Black and brown community to feel comfortable enough with being vulnerable and sharing their experiences of trauma and racism with the very people that did that and have killed one of us is really dangerous and harmful for the mental health of those Black and brown individuals who would be put in the situation to be vulnerable with those officers. And I think that it kind of negates, I could sit and have a conversation with anybody for a long time, and like, yeah, there might be some type of relationship developed, and I do know that there are statistics that you guys have where these partnerships have grown into something more than just, I talked to this person for 7 months, and that's great. But it feels like if this is something that the city of Springfield were to agree to, on behalf of them agreeing to do that, it would feel like an easy way out, because there's been things that we have asked for to address the systemic racism that they would say no to, and that it's too hard, or I don't see the issue there. But for them, if they were to be presented this opportunity and say, you know what, yeah, let's do that, it would honestly, in my opinion, kind of feel like a slap in the face, especially to this commission and the things that we have asked for them to consider in the past. And I would just recommend, maybe if you already have something like this implemented or not, implementing some type of mental health check-ins, especially for the Black and brown people of color that will be putting themselves in these vulnerable positions to teach the people that have oppressed them and put them in these positions to deal with this trauma. That's really important, because sitting and talking with a police officer about, oh yeah, I hate the police because whatever, is really hard for a person to do, especially if you're expected to just have that conversation over coffee or at home and invite these people into your home. I just feel like, again, to reiterate, this is something that might be beneficial to certain cities, but I feel like Springfield is just way too segregated for this to make long-lasting changes on the way that the city already operates. And I just have two questions. You talk a lot about like the good that has come out of it, and we've had this experience and this, and like I know you guys are trying to not necessarily sell it to us, but like that's kind of what you're doing. So you're not going to talk about the adverse experiences, but if you guys have documented how these great relationships have came out of it, can you share an example of a bad connection, and not just, oh, they didn't want to work with them, so we switched them partners, but like something that, because I know something has happened before, so if you could share that with us, maybe. That's my first question.
Okay. Let me try and address that. And Ken, you would be the person for that since you have the other histories there. Again, obviously, confidentiality has to be taken care of here.
Of course, of course. Yeah, listen, I think everything that pardon me, but I didn't catch your name.
It's Brianna.
Brianna, thank you for that, because you were speaking truth. I think the mental health check-ins are extremely important. I think that a lot of my Black and brown friends are tired of having this conversation, and I understand intimately what you mean by having conversations with the very people that have in the past hurt them. Again, this is why the program starts in the fashion that it does, a slow burn, and we're not jumping in the deep end of the pool. There is parts of the first 2 modules that are purposefully not set up to ask questions like the one that you just asked in the beginning, but just getting to know the human in front of you, humanizing the person in front of you, stripping the job away from the individual, both individuals for that matter, right? And then building the relationship from a core. How many people exist in your family? Oh, I have 5 brothers and sisters and a mom. I have 6 brothers and sisters and a mom and a dad. Making simple connections in the beginning that enable you to ask harder and harder and harder questions in the long 7th-month conversation. So it's a slow burn. And I think that that is causing some disconnect with the process as we speak about it tonight. But I assure you that as the program takes on month for month and meeting for meeting, that is addressed. Could we, in the renditions that I have seen ran, have additional mental health support on site? Yeah, I think so. Why not? I can tell you from experience, there have been a couple of instances where partners did not mesh. And we've had people drop out in the middle of the program. That's about 10% of the people who go through the program. It's in the high 80s. The graduation rate is in the high 80s for partners to graduate from the program. So we have to be doing something right in order to get them in most programs, which are 9-month versions, from the orientation to celebration almost 10 months later. There have been a couple of instances where people drop out, but I think that the program is so effectively laid out and the process it takes its time and puts that which we need to address first in front of us and then moves on to topics that are more relevant to the problem and not just getting to know each other. And I've also heard a couple of people this evening say, I don't know that if we're making friends that, we don't need more friends. No, these are partners. These inevitably become partners in endeavors. Could they be your friend? Yeah, absolutely. I think that some of the examples I gave you where we have people who have been each other's partners for 21 years here in Rochester, they're also friends, right? Councilman Wade Norwood and Danny Wegman, the owner of Wegman's supermarket chain, they opened up their own high school together because they felt that the work that they had done needed to start with the youth. And so that they could bring some of this program into that setting. Almost 20 years later, they started that project. But they will both tell you out front that the only reason they ever met and the only reason they ever worked together effectively was because they met at the Biracial Partnership Program in 2001 in Rochester, New York.
Did
Okay.
you have another one, Bree?
I do have one last one. don't necessarily felt like that answered my question though, because I was asking for like, I've heard so many different examples of good outcomes, and I wanted true, honest stories of when there had been conflict. But that's okay. We can move on. I just wanted some clarification on what it means by frame challenge under the cluster sessions, just like what that consists of, and that's it.
Sure. Ken?
So framing the challenge is the actual module. Since the partners have been on their own now, delving into this topic, dealing with what is uncomfortable about it, and creating a bond where both parties can help each other deal with the topic, both on a personal and professional level. And I'm sorry that you felt I didn't answer the other question to its full extent. I'd be more than willing to speak to you more about it. But like Anthony said, sometimes there is confidentiality, and that graduation rate really should speak to the likelihood of there being bad relationships versus good, 10 to 90, 15 to 85%. That being said, framing the challenge is usually month 6. That means we've went through the first 5 months of meeting in a cluster, and we've reached a point now where we've put all the heavy stuff on the table. We've addressed it both in the group setting and as partners. And now it's time to say, what's going on in my community? What is happening? And can I be involved? Can I go into your neighborhood and be part of what is happening there? Should you come to my neighborhood and spread what is happening in your community to my community? So framing the challenges of some of the issues that are happening at the local level is what that cluster, what that module is about. And it's from that module, like Anthony said earlier, that the partners themselves and sometimes the cohort at large will decide that they want to be involved in a particular project on that particular topic. So framing the challenge is referencing the challenges of your community.
That makes
Okay.
sense. Thank you.
So Bob and Kristen have questions, and those will be the last two. So Bob.
I guess I don't really have a question so much as an observation. One of the reasons that one would suspect a high likelihood of developing friendships is because you match them on basic personality traits, correct?
Fair enough.
And demographics, yes.
Well, I'm just saying that
Yes.
that's already a big jump ahead.
That's a huge jump ahead.
I mean, it's like if you and I are 60% the same in our personalities, that's a pretty good bet that if we bump into one another, we're going to succeed. So you structure these friendships starting with kind of an ace in a hole. And and in partial answer, Bree, the failure rate is, as was just mentioned, is that 18% or 15% who don't finish or who don't finish maintaining a friendship. So that's one observation. Second observation is it sounds like, as I'm listening here, that your participants are either volunteers or they are appointed by, say, the chief of police. Is that about right?
They are volunteers, is that your point? That is
One
what-
segment
These
is
are, the partners are volunteers.
I'm talking about your desire to get 10 cops and the chief of police. I mean, you've kind of made a point of that.
Yeah.
And the mayor wants that. That doesn't sound pure volunteer to me. In any case, what I'm really driving at is that you have a self-selecting sample. And that's not a bad thing. How can you be opposed to developing friendships? And I'm not. But I think that I'm just making some methodological observations that kind of supports what other questions and some, what do I want to call it, some hesitation on the part of this group to say, well, okay. And I think that those methodological observations hold water. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Thank you. And Kristen?
I had a couple of questions, but I'll ask them all at once. Kind of back to what Bob was saying, is has the program in the past tried to work with police departments or something of the sort at the level that it is trying to do that in Springfield? And if so, how has that not only affected the interpersonal relationships, but the community at large? And then second question is, I'd like to know what the anticipated cost is like per year. What is the investment that you're looking from the community per year to put a program on like this?
So this information has actually been sent to you, but I have no problems in speaking it out loud because we're very transparent. So the cost of this program is $250,000 per year for the first 2 years. At that point in time when Springfield United is up and running and doing its own, because that's MOSAIC carrying the full load of doing everything, the coaching, the organizing, and all that needs to be done, such as what Topeka United is doing. Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that drops down by about 80% that third year, because we're not doing the heavy carry anymore. There's a group doing the heavy carry. We're not the ones doing the heavy carrying in that third year. So, you know, again, that 250 is to make sure all the matching goes on, to make sure all the partnership, to hire the coaches who are getting a stipend, to get that coordinator up and off the ground on a part-time basis to eventually become a full-time basis. So there's a cost involved in all that. And again, that's all been emailed to you, so you have all the year breakdown as how it goes. But again, it drops down to a reduction of 80% in the third year. Now, if Springfield wants to do it faster than the third year and take over in the second year, it drops down in the second year. But we feel like what's been successful at other locations is we run the program actively for 2 years, and then the community starts taking it over and doing it on their own. So sustain it for our lifetime.
And then the question about the police, and if it's to a similar extent as another community that you've worked with, and how that's affected the community and not just the two relationships.
I'll leave that to Ken.
Indeed. So from the very, very beginning, when this was brought to Mr. Rosenfeld's attention, so something that one of your board members had mentioned before was that and I agree. I have found myself, whilst being the primary program director, hyper aware of who I am and what I am. I have, on several occasions, made attempts to make sure that I am partnering with the right people. I don't believe that I should be the face of this, but here I am. And the work is that important that I will continue it until I can train someone to do what I do. The man who put this together in 2001, Mr. Bob Rosenfeld, is indeed Caucasian. And I think it would be easy to say, well, then that I can see how it was designed and why it comes across in the fashion that it did. But what you may not know, and Anthony may have shared with you, is that he has 7 adopted children. And all but one of them are individuals of color, Black, Vietnamese, Latino. And it is through his own family's experience he felt the necessity to create this. Then at the same time, while he was raising those 7 ethnic children, he got a call from the then mayor, Bill Johnson, who he was friends with. And I think that it was both of their experience. Bill Johnson, by the way, is Black. And it was through both of their experiences that this program was created. And they reached out to people like Chanel Hawkins from the Urban League and some other help that they knew they needed. And so this program was started by two individuals and created by a handful of people who knew what needed to be done and needed to be said. And so we could look at this for face value without actually going through the course or looking at the materials and going through them page by page to find out what it is that's being asked of the participants. And for face value, I might have to agree with a couple of people at the table tonight, but I've also been through the program. I have a partner. Growing up in New York City, I didn't necessarily need this program to teach me how to be friends and allies. But you know what? I now have another partner by coming through this program that I do everything I can with frequently as I possibly can, to make both our lives better through the use of our partnership.
So to get to your clarity of point, when it started in Rochester, there was deep racial issues going on in the city at the point in time. The mayor pulled in Bob Rosenfeld to kind of address that, and that's kind of how this program got started. Same thing occurred in Greensboro, North Carolina. So we will get you more specific details about police involvement in those communities, so you have all that information as well. But again, in Milwaukee, racial tensions had to be addressed. Program was created. We deal with cities that have major racial tension.
The only
This
place
is
it's
one of
ever
them.
been done.
So we try and go to communities that desperately need this because of the fact that there are such deep segregation between communities that live on opposite sides of towns at points in time. So what this program is created to deal with the racial tension and issues in the communities that they got started in. But we will get you specific information about the police.
Okay. Well, thank you.
The first program, they asked that all the leaders in the community were involved. So since the inception of this program, local police departments, fire departments, hospitals, and so on, et cetera, have all been inclined to be part of the program at the behest of their fellow citizens.
Well, thank you. Ken and Anthony, thank you so much for the presentation, and we'll look forward to that information, and send us any other information that was relevant to the conversation. We're happy to get that too, so.
We will do that. And thank you again, Commission, for your time.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Yeah.
Yes,
thanks.
thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, next we'll hear from Care for Victims, an organization and coalition focused on improving the justice system experience for victims of crime. We're joined by two experts I'd like to introduce now. You have copies of their biographies in the books here, so allow me to introduce Amy Endicott and Chad Reese, who will be offering insight to share with us tonight. Amy Endicott's the founder and managing director of Care for Victims. She leverages her extensive consulting background working for Fortune 500 companies, startup organizations, and not-for-profits with experience in leadership, digital strategy, user experience, training, development, events management, program management, change management, and communications. Chad Reese is a policy consultant for the Institute of Justice, where he works to empower activists, entrepreneurs, and everyday people by equipping them with policy information, communication tools they need for their voices to be heard. Through research, testimony, and interactions with the media, Chad works to ensure that policymakers understand the need to secure essential rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Thanks for joining us tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So, a little bit about us as an organization. Care for Victims.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
Closer?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Totally different. Okay. So, Care for Victims is an organization and a growing coalition that's focused on improving the justice system experience for victims of crime. CARE is actually an acronym, and that reflects our 3 core priorities. And these were developed because as we started to look into the justice system, we saw these 3 things that kept reoccurring that victims want and need most, but are still lacking. So first and foremost, and that's compassion. Compassion for people when they're coming forward to do the right thing, to report crimes, and the stories that are being shared back with us, the way that they're being treated is appalling. So that can range from people who are being belittled, condescended to, harassed, discriminated, victim blamed, and as we all know here, much worse. There's a general lack of accountability to victims, and there's a lack of victims' rights enforcement, which we'll talk a little bit about more in this presentation. So from these core priorities, we developed our organizational objectives. That's first and foremost to improve victims' rights and the enforcement of those rights. We also seek to improve justice system transparency and accountability, which again, we think aligns well with the Massey Commission and very similar to some of the objectives that you have. And again, one of the reasons why we wanted to come here tonight and share with you some of the recommendations that we have from our work that may be beneficial for the work that you're doing as well. We also want to identify and eliminate justice system loopholes that allow for corruption. And we want to educate and promote awareness of victims' rights and supporting agencies. So whenever we give these presentations, we always have these series of questions that we ask the groups just to kind of gauge everyone's understanding of some basic concepts of the justice system and sort of make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward. So this is going to be interactive. The first question we have is, who represents victims of crime in the criminal justice system? And if anyone knows and wants to shout it out, feel free to. State's attorney. Public advocacy centers. Those are both very good answers. Public advocacy centers actually may help victims navigate the system, but they don't actually represent them or their interest in the court system. State's attorneys is another great answer, but the answer to that is they don't represent victims. They represent the interests of the people. Has anyone here, by a show of hands, heard of victims' rights, and do you know what they are? You have? Okay. Can anyone name just one of the victims' rights that are in our Illinois Constitution? What was that? In certain concepts, but not in the Bill of Rights in the way that we're thinking, but it was a good answer.
A right to be made whole or seek reparation.
Restitution?
Restitution.
Yes, that
thank
is
you.
one, yes. So again, we asked some basic questions around victims and understanding what their rights are, because it helps to illustrate how they're treated in the justice system. Because again, firstly, just by a show of hands, audience and commissioners, who here has heard of Miranda rights? Almost all of us. Who can recite Miranda rights? Right. Exactly. So we've all seen those. So the reasons we ask this is because it highlights what we consider of the justice system and the scales that are supposed to be equal and balanced, fair and impartial. Why do we know more about the rights of the accused than the rights of the abused?
Right.
So again, as part of our organizational objectives, we want to educate and inform about victims' rights. And so this document here in the purple background is from the Illinois Constitution. It's our Bill of Victim Rights. It's very hard to read. They're actually listed here on the left. These three documents sort of go hand in hand. They are accessible on the Attorney General's website. And I'm not going to read all of them to you, but again, just for kind of context and awareness of what some of these are, you have the right to be treated with fairness and respect to your dignity and privacy throughout the criminal justice process. You have the right to timely notification of court proceedings. Number 4, you have the right to communicate with the prosecution. Because again, prosecutors don't represent victims, but you have the right to speak with them. You have the right to timely disposition of the case following the arrest of the accused. You have the right to restitution, which is the number 12 there. So one of the things I want to call out here, these are the rights that no one knows about, but of interest, the second paragraph towards the bottom of the bill, which most people can't see right now, I want to highlight this because this is important to note. In this document, it states, the law requires that these rights must be requested in writing when charges have been filed against an offender. Contact the state's attorney's office prosecuting the case and complete a written notice of victim's assertion of rights. So to add to the complexity of victims who are trying to navigate a justice system that is overwhelming, overly complex, now you have to write out a form to assert your rights that you also do not know about. And if you want to redact those rights, you have to fill out another form. And so this FAQ document provides some answers and guidance, which again, most people don't know about. And so for the rest of these questions, the answers that I'm going to quote are from this document. Something to think about with these rights: when do they apply? At the time you become a victim? At the time you go to the police to report a crime? No. These apply if prosecutors file charges, which can create a lot of problems if they don't. Another obvious question: who are these rights protecting you from? Who is it that's violating these rights? The people you went to for help in the justice system. If your rights are violated, how do you enforce them? Anyone want to guess? We called you. Thank you very much. According to the FAQ document, you have the right to secure an attorney to help you enforce your rights, which on paper sounds great. In reality, trying to find an attorney that will enforce victim rights is nearly impossible. And that is for a couple of reasons. We called personally dozens of attorneys throughout Illinois to see if they would take on victims' rights cases as part of our effort. And the number one reason we were given was no, because there's not enough money in it for them. Not enough money. So it's not about justice, it's not about reinforcing rights, it's just not worth my time and effort. And the reason why that is because what's known as qualified immunity laws. And qualified immunity laws basically make it almost impossible to enforce a person's rights. And so law firms will say it's not worth our firm's time and effort to pursue these types of cases because they are rarely ever successful. So just to kind of summarize this, you have victims' rights that no one knows about. You have an assertion of rights that no one knows about. You have a frequently asked questions document that no one knows about. If your rights are violated, most people don't know how to enforce them. If you know how to enforce them, there are rarely any attorneys that will assist you in enforcing your rights. So as an organization, looking at our mission, our priorities, our objectives, and obviously these issues that victims face in the justice system, the work that we're currently focused on falls into these 4 different categories. So first and foremost, we help victims come forward and share their stories through victim stories. And for many, this is their only outlet to share how they were treated by the justice system. Other outlets might mean that you can go to the media, which they may or may not want to do for their own personal reasons. For those victim stories are very important and very impactful to the work that they do because they help us share these stories with our local governments, our local municipalities to say that these problems and issues aren't happening somewhere else. They're happening right here in our own communities. These stories are also helpful for us when we go and we start to work on legislation to help bolster and improve victims' rights, and more importantly, legislation that's going to help enforce those rights. The other area that we're looking at is education, and we're looking at criminal justice programs and legal programs, including the American Bar Association and our state bar associations, to make sure that they are creating learning objectives at the course level and program level that actually includes victims' rights information, how to enforce these rights, trauma-informed care, which right now is grossly lacking. Just with one of the state schools that we looked at, they had no core curriculum around victims' rights in their main body of work of required courses, but they had one victimology course you could take as an elective. And lastly, we provide consulting services for any organizations that are looking for justice system and government reform That can include project management, change management, communications, process procedure improvements, audits, and assessments. Which brings us to the work that we've done this past year in McLean County. Care for Victims took it upon ourselves to conduct an informal, high-level assessment of different local agencies within McLean County, between City of Bloomington, Town of Normal, and at the county level. I won't go through all that just for the sake of time, but what came out of that is we looked at 13 different individual agencies and had over 150 recommendations for how to improve providing victims' rights information to people, how to enforce victims' rights, community resources, which is another huge need that people need at the point in time when they're coming forward to help that they're not getting today. And it's really bad in Bloomington Normal. I'll share more of that a little bit later. But then also ways to improve the transparency of the justice system and accountability within the justice system, within those different agencies. So again, 150 recommendations just from a very informal, high-level assessment. With that, our current state for this work, back in May, we started reaching out to local government officials, city managers, chiefs of police to share our findings and recommendations. And it was a lot of information for them to consume and absorb. And so we've allowed them the last however many weeks to review that, get back with us with questions, and it is our goal that they will take those recommendations, prioritize them, and start to assimilate that into the workflows that they already have, and provide us with an implementation timeline for when we can expect to see some of those solutions being implemented. So again, we hope that that will be completed in the next couple of weeks. But with that, we also recognize that the Massey Commission is doing its own work with recommendations, and you're coming up on a very tight timeline as well. And so we wanted tonight to share some of those larger recommendations that we think sort of cross our different work streams and provide an opportunity to talk with you about that. Some of those bigger issues really pertain to what we talked about earlier, qualified immunity. And so tonight, to talk more about this topic specifically, is Chad Reese with the Institute for Justice. They are one of our coalition partners at the national level. They're an incredible organization. I can't speak highly enough about them and the work that they're doing in this space. They are the industry experts in helping to look at ending qualified immunity across the country. And so with that, I'd like to turn things over to Chad to continue this conversation.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I know through a lot of the work that the commission has probably done, either in your conversations or just in the research that you all have done as commissioners, I'm sure that you've come across qualified immunity. I will probably be explaining a little bit of it. I apologize if I'm explaining things that you all have already heard and discussed. Feel free to shoo me along. I'll also try to go a little quickly since I know we've spent some time here this evening, and I'm happy to catch back up on anything that we need to during the Q&A session. Appreciate Amy's introduction, and thank you all commissioners for allowing me to be here. This is a rough outline of kind of what I'd like to go through tonight. I won't bury the lead. My recommendation at the end is essentially going to be that the Massey Commission include among its policy recommendations reform to qualified immunity. I'll talk a little bit about what I think can be done at the state level, since of course that's a federal issue. But I'll start by going into a little bit of detail about what the Institute for Justice is and what we do. We are a public interest civil liberties law firm, which essentially just means we represent clients pro bono when their constitutional rights have been violated by the government. And our work spans not just the litigation side of things. I actually work with the activism and the legislative side of the House. We launched as part of those two buckets our Americans Against Qualified Immunity initiative in 2020. That was simply the belief based on polling, based on our own views, that there is a unifying theme that constitutional rights and civil rights matter. And despite the incredibly real and painful challenges that the United States was coming to grips with in 2020, there was still that core that we could use to try to unite people around at least this concept, that qualified immunity is frankly an un-American, it's an unconstitutional concept, and its time has come and gone, and it's hurt the most vulnerable among us for too long. So that AAQI initiative really is our grassroots program. Depending on how you count it, between the email listservs and the Facebook group, we have tens of thousands of members across the country, I believe in all 50 states at this point. For everyone's benefit, I'll just give the sort of basic description of what qualified immunity is. It is a legal doctrine that essentially stops you from bringing a federal civil liberties lawsuit. So if your constitutional rights are violated by a government official, the overwhelming way that you would seek to get redress or justice or restitution for that violation would be to sue the offending official or their government employer in federal court under a very particular federal statute that gives you the right to bring that lawsuit. Unfortunately, in 1982, the Supreme Court attached a non-constitutional, sort of made up, as we like to say, I think that's the technical legal term, doctrine of qualified immunity that says, aha, but you can only bring those lawsuits under very specific, narrow circumstances that we just decided to make up. And that set of narrow circumstances is a two-part test. So first, you as the victim of a rights abuse, let's say inappropriate use of force by a police officer is probably the most common one we all think about. First, you have to prove that the official violated a constitutional right. Then the second part is the tricky one. You have to establish that that right was clearly established at the time. Now, on paper and on its face, that sounds like a reasonable thing because what the court claimed is that you essentially have to give the government official notice that what they have done was wrong. There had to be some way that they knew that what they were engaging in was inappropriate. Unfortunately, there are two problems with that. First, that test has continued to be interpreted more and more narrowly by the courts to the point that you essentially have to find a case with the exact same fact pattern as your case, either in your own federal circuit or at the Supreme Court. The example I always give here, which is a challenging one to describe after all these years of telling it, is imagine, and this is a real case, you are an individual who is surrendering to law enforcement who are trying to detain you. You are kneeling with your hands raised, surrendering actively. They still sick police dogs on you, you're mauled and you're attacked. That's, I think most of us would agree, an abuse of force. You bring a federal civil rights lawsuit. The Supreme Court says, even though you and your attorney found another case where someone was lying down and surrendering to law enforcement when they sicked their dogs on him and were mauled, you were kneeling, which is sufficiently different from lying on the ground. Therefore, your right to be protected from that particular abuse of force in that circumstance was not clearly established. And what that means is that the officer and the department involved get qualified immunity, in this case, immunity from being sued in that civil rights case. That is a situation that has played itself out in countless times across the country since the 1982 decision. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of those that continues to be narrowly interpreted by the courts. Courts often skip to question 2 on the two-part test. That's the other challenging part. So you can imagine a world in which this two-part test almost works if courts are very careful when you bring that lawsuit to say, okay, perhaps the official didn't know that this was a violation now, but for going forward, we're going to establish that, yes, a right was violated here. There's another Supreme Court case that says courts can skip to number 2, which means that these rights are never established. And not only are you rewarded as a government official for violating someone's rights in a novel way if you come up with a way that no one has done it before, but now even if you are repeating things that are grossly offensive to most Americans' sense of justice, you still kind of have a chance to get off scot-free if the court doesn't decide in its decision that a right was violated in that case. There are a lot of reasons, if those examples haven't convinced you already, why qualified immunity reform is urgently needed. The first one gets back to what Amy was talking about with the Illinois Victims' Bill of Rights, which is a really important part of seeking justice is actually receiving compensation, receiving justice in a tangible way. And right now, if you are unable to sue in a federal civil rights case because of qualified immunity, that's where your court case stops. A judge will never hear the merits of your case. You'll certainly never seek any justice or damages from the government or the official or the department responsible. Second is, as I mentioned before, since courts aren't clarifying the law by establishing new and increasingly broad precedent, new civil rights law sort of isn't being created, One of the situations we found in the Institute for Justice's practice is this means that things like new technology gives government officials ways to violate your rights. That, of course, doesn't exist in precedent because the technology didn't exist before. We represented a client in Ohio who satirized or parodied his local police department on Facebook. The right to parody is one of the most clearly established rights in the Constitution. It's part of the First Amendment. Usually that's where you want to be. There's a lot of good case law in the First Amendment that's going to support your right to parody a government official. But the courts determined that Facebook was novel enough, that this was somehow different. Qualified immunity was granted. Didn't matter that his apartment was ransacked. He was arrested and jailed. He got nothing for that. As Amy mentioned earlier, attorneys know all this. So while we exist as a pro bono civil liberties public interest law firm that can take on a small number of clients for free, most attorneys are not going to spend most of their time looking for these cases. And if you do get an attorney, the best bet is usually going to be through some sort of settlement process, which wonderful when that works out and when that is a way to seek justice. That also doesn't create additional precedent, which can cause problems down the line. But there are just not a lot of people doing this work. And so victims of civil rights violations find it increasingly difficult to find someone to even start that lawsuit to begin with. Those of you who work, and I think that probably applies to everyone in the room here, in the criminal justice space, know how important it is to have meaningful and genuine community trust between government officials and those they are supposed to govern. Our lives are literally in their hands in the case of armed government officials. In the case of our tax preparers or others, our financial history, our private lives, in the case of schools, it's our children's lives, are in their hands. We have to trust them or our entire civil society breaks down. Qualified immunity is a constant and repeated slap in the face to people who say, look, here's an example of a problem that needs to be solved, and the system told me just to go home and forget about it. And government simply can't function in that fashion. And perhaps the most important aspect, I think, for a commission like this is that I think qualified immunity renders a lot of other really good specific recommendations unenforceable. I will never suggest that ending qualified immunity is a silver bullet to any set of problems, criminal justice, racial reconciliation, anything like that. But what I will say is it can stop any number of other good ideas from going forward. We could have the clearest civil rights written down. We could write down whatever policies we want in the Illinois state constitution. If there's not an effective way to sue when those rights are violated, there's no enforcement mechanism. This is just a general quote. This is a legal principle that's been around for hundreds of years that's part of the American common law tradition. I won't read the specific quote. It has big words, and I didn't bring a water up with me, so I don't want to try myself there. But I will say, in order for a right to exist, there has to be a remedy when that right is violated. Otherwise, the right is just a set of words on a piece of paper. Our solution is the Illinois Accountability Act. So this is a model bill that we've developed in partnership with Amy's organization, Care for Victims, and it's based on work that we have done in other states. I mentioned earlier that this is a federal problem. Qualified immunity was created by the Supreme Court. It exists attached to a federal statute, which means at the end of the day, Congress and or the Supreme Court are gonna have to solve this problem. The good news is that states and some localities can fix it for their citizens and for their constituents. A state model bill can essentially create an end run around the qualified immunity problem. All you have to do, and what the model legislation does, is create a new cause of action that happens in state courts. So instead of suing under what's called Section 1983, that's the federal civil rights statute, and going to federal court, you would sue under the Illinois Accountability Act, and you would go to an Illinois state court. The model bill could and does and should explicitly say that qualified immunity is not a viable defense, and you don't have to worry about qualified immunity from that point forward. It proceeds just like another civil rights case, or just like one that got through qualified immunity and was now being discussed on its merits. Incredibly importantly, it requires public bodies to actually pay damages and attorney's fees. One of the most important things in securing real meaningful justice for victims is making sure that, for instance, they don't sue the wrong person or individual. They get a moral victory in court, but then the court says, but that person is judgment proof, they declare bankruptcy, and now no money goes to the family. Or, well, you win, but you get no attorney's fees, and now we're back to the same problem before of there are no attorneys in private practice taking on these sorts of cases. So that's another important component. I'm happy to discuss more of these if you all want to get into the weeds on the model legislation. Some of the other specific ones that I think are most important are making it easier to terminate officials. That is the section that is most important for the accountability side of things. It's really important if someone is part of one of these lawsuits that would come through this model legislation, that the department that hired them, that trained them, and that perhaps should have fired them already has a means to do so. So it creates a pathway to terminate officials who are responsible for those rights violations. What we're interested in here is making sure that the incentives of government officials align with the people they're supposed to serve and protect. And in particular, that their hiring, training, and firing practices make them have skin in the game. So that if a department, if an agency is recklessly hiring or training individuals that are then going out and recklessly violating people's civil rights, that they are responsible for paying victims until they get those policies correct. Just a couple of examples here, and again, we can talk about these more in the Q&A if you all are interested. There have been a number of qualified immunity reforms at the state and local level. These are the two that I most point to because they're sort of the most robust state level reforms. Colorado was sort of the first to act in this regard. They have one that's law enforcement specific, and it has a specific individual liability component, which means you're suing the individual law enforcement officer. The New Mexico model, which is the one that the Illinois Accountability Act most closely monitors, covers all government officials, and you sue the government body, the agency, or the department. Earlier when I was talking about making sure one individual doesn't just declare bankruptcy and then deny justice to the victim, that's why that's so important, so that you're actually suing the person who's doing the hiring and the training, and who can actually pay in the event that someone had a tragic incident and deserves monetary compensation. These are our recommendations. Again, I've gone over kind of the broad strokes. I'll ID a couple on the QI side and then hand it back over to Amy. We would love to partner with you all if the Massey Commission is interested in pursuing qualified immunity reform in Illinois. These are just kind of a list of things we work on with our coalition partners like we did in New Mexico when we helped pass that law there. First, including a qualified immunity reform proposal in your final reports or in your intermediate reports. Helping us identify legislative partners at the state level. You all have wonderful connections. You are the leaders. You know who can and should be worked with and who would be the best to lead this kind of effort. We would love to learn from you those kinds of connections. We also find it's really helpful if local communities do even non-binding resolutions to their state legislature and their state legislative offices and houses, supporting this kind of reform, saying, yes, we as a municipality think this is important. We think the state should be doing this. I mentioned earlier, I travel the country doing grassroots events on this type of thing. We'd love to partner with you on any grassroots education opportunities. In the past, we've done things like brake light repair parties, where we partner with local groups, have some mechanics come out to replace broken taillights, importantly reducing things like being pulled over that could lead to a civil rights violation, but also using that as an opportunity to have a conversation about this issue for those who are interested. And then for those of you who are passionate about it, we would love to partner with you if there is a bill introduced, and would encourage you to testify and continue to support any qualified immunity reform efforts.
And then in addition to that, we talked about the assessment we did in McLean County. We also recommend that an audit or assessment be conducted in Springfield and Sangamon County justice system agencies, again, focused on these areas of victims' rights, community resources, transparency, and accountability information. In addition to this, we also request an audit and an assessment at the state level of the Illinois Attorney General complaint departments, including the Civil, Human, and Victims' Rights Violations departments and the Public Integrity Bureau, and request to publish complaints that have been received, investigations conducted, and decisions made. There's a couple of reasons for this. If you remember back, I believe it was last year, you submitted a civil rights complaint to the Attorney General's office. And the reply that you got was almost verbatim the same reply we got when we submitted a civil rights complaint. Part of the problem is when victims use that as an accountability measure, there's a lot of hope that goes into that. Filling out this form that this is gonna get traction. And from a victim's perspective, it is very traumatizing to have to recount this information, put it into a form, send it off with the hopes that someone is going to listen. And instead, what we both got back was this boilerplate templated response that said, not only do your individual civil rights not matter, but thanks for the information, we'll keep it on file. And if we start to see a pattern of behavior that looks problematic, then maybe we'll do some investigation. That is not acceptable. At the local level, again, just from our own sort of informal assessment, we found 150 recommendations. Our guess is that you would find something similar. I do want to share with these assessments, we're not only finding things that are wrong, but we're also finding things that they're doing well. And I do just want to share one quick example with you of what Springfield appears to be doing well. For the city of Bloomington and the town of Normal, one of the very easy things we did was go into the police departments and ask them, do you have victims' rights information? And can you share it with us? And are you providing this to victims? And then do you have any community resources that you're handing out? They didn't have any victim rights information, but each of those departments handed us a document for community resources. And each of those documents referenced Attorney General Lisa Madigan. So we're looking at documents that are at least 6 years old. One of the documents, most of the sources that were listed were no longer in service. They're outdated. Numbers that were listed were no longer working. There were no categories of information. It was just names. There was no description of what these services were for or headings of what they would provide. Another municipality, their document the font was so illegible you couldn't read it. It just looked like something that had been photocopied 100 times. And then on the other side, it was in Spanish. That was given to English-speaking people. So we did a quick assessment for Springfield, and we went into your office today, and I'm proud to report that many of the recommendations that we had for City of Bloomington, Town of Normal, you are indeed doing. You do have a handout that has very bold, legible headings and categories of helpful information and resources. You have an updated date, which is something we asked for them to include so that you know when this was last updated. And then you also have information that you hand out to victims, giving them victim resources, court procedure information, check on statuses of your case, orders of protection, which City of Bloomington, Town of Normal did not. So again, the assessments can be very helpful in identifying what you're doing well, but also those areas for or opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, just pass it around your thing. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Chad. And what? Yeah, we'll do questions and comments now.
Is it possible that we can get a copy of this?
You have it.
Program? We have it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome to share that with us.
Yeah, we'll get all the information around to you for sure. You did get these examples. Yes.
Handed out.
Right, handed out, yeah, right.
And those are the drafts of the proposed legislation and the resolution for your review.
Comments or questions from anyone? Yeah, yes, Veronica.
Can you tell me a little bit about the context? Because I'm trying to think about the historic time in 1982 when they decided that shielding government officials from liability was more important or superseded victims' right. What happened there? Why did it change?
So it's a great question, actually, because the instinct is usually this must have been to protect some sort of split-second decision-making.
Yeah.
This was a whistleblower case from the Nixon administration. So it had nothing.
Wow.
That actually had nothing to do with law enforcement, even though that's one of the most commonly utilized aspects of qualified immunity now. We actually did a study not that long ago, and I'm happy to share with the commission for circulation. I should have brought copies with me. A shocking number of these rights abuses actually fall under the First Amendment, and they're retaliatory in nature. So someone says something, and a government official comes after them for it. We represented a woman who won her case at the Supreme Court just recently. who ran for council because she didn't like the way her city was being managed. She had a petition against the city manager to do a recall vote, won the city council seat. The mayor, city manager, and the police chief of that town effectively conspired against her to charge her with some trumped-up charges on stealing government documents, which were her accidentally taking the copy of her own petition with her from the council chambers that day. So those are the kinds of cases we see a lot of, in addition to the use of force ones that are most often coming to mind.
Yeah, that was part of my second question. What cases go to the Illinois court in general?
What cases go to the what?
What cases go to the Illinois court, right?
Oh, the Illinois court.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So
Like
right,
First Amendment cases, or?
so right now, if you were to file a federal civil rights lawsuit, you would probably go straight to federal court. So you wouldn't go through the sort of Illinois state court system. Now, that said, there are a couple of situations in which you can sue government officials. They tend to be more sort of like negligence or, somebody dinged my car kinds of cases that are based on state statutes.
Brian?
The kind of piggyback on the litigation question, Chicago is probably our biggest data set we have for police misconduct settlements. I imagine you've seen other cities of similar size, or what is that lawsuit under that those settle? And are they subject to qualified immunity?
So if a lawsuit settles, it won't be subject to qualified immunity.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But is the underlying, are they 1983 typically, or?
I don't have this is my very cautious nature. I don't want to make an empirical claim that I can't back up if I don't have the numbers in front of me. It's a good question. I'll happy to look into it.
That's fine. It just occurred to me, yeah, like I said, Chicago's easily our biggest data set, and they have, I think they're getting close to 100 million already this year.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Susan, did you have? Yep, Susan.
The request for audit or assessment, who does those? Who would we be requesting do an audit? Like, do they do their own audit? That doesn't sound like a good idea.
That is a great question. I will say we do that, but we're not doing that to promote that at this juncture. We are just recommending that would be a good thing to do. There are probably other organizations, companies out there that do that type of thing. I don't know of any offhand specifically, but it may be something that you could look into. Consulting
and that's
company.
something that you do as a fee for service?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So then my next question, given the draft legislation that you've shared with us, are you in conversation with any Illinois legislators that are on board with that, willing to sponsor it, discussing it?
We are. Maurice West and Curtis Tarver. Curtis Tarver has pending legislation known as the Bad Apples Act that had stalled, and so we reached out to both of their offices. We talked at length with Maurice West because in the past he had been interested in this type of reform. Again, nothing has been committed and solidified at this point in time, but they are two representatives that we have reached out to in the past.
Any senators?
Not yet.
Does that mean this is new?
This is new.
And the county board draft, is that something that you've used in your own county?
And I'm sorry, the county board draft meaning?
We have the resolution draft, county draft. Sorry.
It's not something that, it's fairly new for us, actually. Most of the work we've done has purely been on the state level. Recently, once Colorado, New Mexico passed state-level qualified immunity reforms, unfortunately, as I'm sure everyone here knows, a lot of other criminal justice police-related reforms lost a lot of steam after 2021. So we've also adopted a model ordinance that's a model, local level version of the state bill you have in front of you. So we've started engaging more with counties and cities. Not every city and county can actually pass something like this. So the resolution that we have here is something new we're offering or suggesting, that counties, even if you're not going to pass your own qualified immunity reform, that you at least take a step and try to encourage your state to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess I have a question too about whether the description you gave, if I understood you correctly, that if our state ended qualified immunity and there were a way to file state charges against a public entity for violating constitutional rights, they could be pursued through state courts rather than federal courts.
Yes, that's right. I will say, with the exception of federal officials, because the state of Illinois doesn't have jurisdiction, which is obviously the reason why we continue to advocate at the federal level. One of the things that's most interesting here is the connection between state and federal task forces. Obviously, there's a lot of connection there. So in those cases, it's possible that ending qualified immunity for state officials could help if it's a state and federal task force. Although our organization also works to end problematic immunities for those types of task force, so that's not a sure thing, but it would be for state and local officials.
So this resolution would not allow people in our communities to file charges against ICE for kidnapping their family members.
Right. That would still require an act of Congress or Supreme Court, unfortunately.
Other comments or questions? Calvin?
Yeah, I have a question. So when was the Bad Apples bill introduced?
I don't know. I don't know if you know, Amy.
Don't quote me on this, but I believe it's been in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe 2021. Erica, or is she still, do you know offhand? 2021, and it stalled maybe a year or two ago.
Okay, and in the Bad Apples Act, have you guys seen the actual bill?
Yes, and I believe that is more limited. It's just focused on law enforcement. It doesn't address the entire justice system or government employees.
Okay, is the statute of limitations and abatement in that bill?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
Or at least it would be modified from what we're recommending.
Okay.
And I do want to elaborate on that. Why we've changed the statute of limitations here is because, again, as you've seen, it's very problematic. People don't even know they have rights to enforce. And so by the time they figure this out, that 1-year statute of limitations is long gone. Then you have to compound that with trying to find an attorney, which could take years-long effort in that, and then maybe not even finding an attorney. And so by the time you're able to build this case and get any type of traction or assistance, those very limited statute of limitations are a bar to justice. And so we want to eradicate that to give people the opportunity to still enforce their rights, even though all these other obstacles are stacked against them.
Okay, so if you're recommending a statute of limitations, would that be for cases going forward as soon as the bill passes, or that would be even for cases before the bill passed?
I would love for it to be before that. But as it's written, just to clarify, I'll have Chad answer that.
Yeah, that is a really good question, and it might depend on other Illinois state law, so that's something I'd have to clarify with my colleagues who'd be more qualified to answer that. But it's a good question. My guess would be that it would be forward-looking. I don't suspect it would be possible to do a retroactive one, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay, because I know some laws are, retroactive compared to just going forward.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you so much for the great presentation. Thank you so much for the clear recommendations and for all the recommendations that we've been getting up to this point, including this presentation. We'll be gathering them together for the next 3 Massey Commission meetings as we get the recommendations from the work groups as well. So I think that's going to be a lot of the work for us going forward. I've got one comment here before we go into the public comment section. So I'd like to give a short update from the June meeting. As you know, we had a presentation of State of Illinois data regarding the differential racial nature of traffic stops and car searches done by Springfield Police Department and the Sangamon County Sheriff's Department. The data was presented to us by Edward Yanka of the ACLU Illinois and Kenn Page, president of the Sangamon County chapter of the ACLU. Mr. Yonka, Mr. Page were kind enough to provide us with their presentation and with the raw data, the most recent data from the state of Illinois for years 2021, 2022, and 2023. So with this information and making some reasonable population assumptions, we were able to calculate and compare traffic stop ratio and the car search ratio for black and white populations for the city and the county. You might remember that there were no calculated ratios for the car searches at that time. So when we did that, we found that the traffic stop ratio for black people compared to white people was just about 6 for both the Springfield Police Department and the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office for those 3 years. That means on a per capita basis, black people were 6 times more likely, 500% more likely, to have a traffic stop than were white people in both the city and the county. We also found that the car search ratio for black people compared to white people was more than 14 for both the Springfield Police Department and the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. That means that on a per capita basis, black people are 14 times more likely, 1,300% more likely, not 10%, not 50, not 100, 1,300% more likely to have their car searched at a traffic stop than white people in both the city and the county in those 3 years. So I just wanted to give that clarification. So we had that correct. Okay, so now we're going to open the floor for public comment. I certainly would like to acknowledge the invaluable role that the community voices have been for the Massey Commission. This input is welcome and essential. We have 2 speakers signed up tonight, and we will keep the same 5-minute limit and the same rules that we've had before. So we'll start with the first speaker, Lisa Johnson. Lisa?
Good evening. I want to open up just letting you all know how proud I am of you. I know that you have had to sit through so many speeches and sift through so much information, a lot of which I can see on your faces has made you exasperated and angry, and you have just proven to me why you are there and I am not. And so thank you all so very, very much. I would like to reiterate at this point the recommendation for anti-racism training. I strongly feel that that is the way that this commission needs to go, the way that Sangamon County needs to go, the way that the city of Springfield needs to go. The numbers that you just ran off really, prove that. And when I'm on the steering committee for the ACLU, along with Gail, and when we knew that it was 5.7, which is 6 times, we tried to get it out to everybody we could and just drown City Council with those numbers, but without your strong recommendations and utilization of those numbers, I fear that, all that we do sitting in City Council meetings will really go to waste. So I would like to go through you and just beg you please to, and not just police departments and sheriff departments. What I understand is that only 2 city council members have taken anti-racism training when it was open to all of them. I would hope that you would recommend that the mayor, that the entire county board, that the entire city council, that OPED, the office of, the financial office for the city, every single employee that works for the city or the county take anti-racism training. It is vital, it is imperative, and even in the training that we were in the last time, I had to get up and do my, black woman thing, because people still were resistant to understanding the white supremacy behind even some of our, educational knowledge. We tend to really, really rely on our PhDs and not even consider real context or the idea that our PhDs came through a white supremacist education system. So a lot of what we think we know, we might not know. And so for that reason alone, I would really hope that you make that recommendation for anti-racism training. The last thing I want to say is, if anybody gives you a Cronbach's Alpha, you make sure that they also give you the t-test analysis, okay, the correlations, the factor analysis, the variance, and the complete multinomial logistic regression table. Don't let anybody fool y'all with one little number and put that up there and act like that's the whole thing. Okay? Because y'all are already smarter than, I don't know why anybody did that with the dean of a medical school, but sitting right here. But please, just make sure that the people that are coming before you, because I felt insulted. I know all of y'all, I think, almost all of y'all. I don't like it when people insult your intelligence. Okay? That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Kim Pasha. There he is.
I was over a school district. My apologies. Things are falling
No
apart
worries.
over there. So,
Welcome.
I really want to just talk about the expansion of the mission. There's not many months left in the initial mission of the Massey Commission, and I want to offer any help I can to pushing our community, the county, or even the city in funding that further. I think over the last, how long has it been now? I'm sorry, today's been a really long day, but it's been months. And all I think any of us have really learned from all this experience is how terrible things are around here. How long the systems in place and the authority figures that have been allowed to maintain these structures have let things slide into a place where life expectancies are decades apart, incomes are tens of thousands, traffic stops are in the hundreds of %. Our school district faces incredible violence against both teachers and students in lesser areas, and they want parental responsibility, as though somehow parents are going to fix the inequalities that have led these outcomes to being more of a continual outcome for our community. And it's frustrating because a lot of you do know that I'm in a lot of places. Like, I was just a district for 2.5 hours, and I rolled over here because y'all were still going. I don't want to miss it. And it's frustrating because we have a lot of groups out there, but I think there needs to be more weight applied, more than just a recommendation. For example, with like qualified immunity, our police contract is up in 2026. They're negotiating right now, and qualified immunity is a part of that contract. So are some of the other procedures and things that they get away with against our citizens. We need to be, and this isn't meant to be an attack on you guys, but we need to be more active community-wise, whether it's the Massey Commission or any group, in trying to be more vocal about forcing them to be culpable to us as a community, to what our city is negotiating for us from the police department. I mean, a lot of those abuses are tolerated because, for example, with Michael Egan, he ran over 2 people while drunk while on the city's police payroll. They quick retired him so they could deny responsibility, but more importantly, the officers at the scene that we all know gave him glasses of water, let him hang out for 2 to 3 hours, didn't breathalyze or blood test him. I mean, it was a considerable miscarriage. The most they could do is give him a slap on the wrist, retraining for those officers, because that's what their union contract says. That's what we have to really think about, is that a lot of this stuff isn't a matter of the chief coming in, because even the chiefs voiced concerns when I've spoken to them, that the union is the real person in charge of these decisions. So while people will come and be like, Scarlett or Beal, and while they do have a level of day-to-day responsibility for outcomes, patrol or leadership, they're not the ones who make those real decisions about how do we punish these officers, how do we retrain these officers, what do we do with officers that are continual problems? Do we have to continually wait for them to reoffend multiple times to remove them from the force? And I'm not saying simple pressure is going to change that contract, but I haven't seen anybody say anything about it, regardless of the group or commission or coalition or anything, because a lot of times that stuff tends to happen in the background. They're not talking about that publicly. Or like, for instance, tonight, the school district, they've had 12 meetings with the teachers union. 12, and they still haven't come to a union contract agreement. I mean, when we think about that, though, with the problems that are endemic to the school district and the threats that our children face in those schools, multiple suicides, murder cases, shootings, stabbings, I mean, these are not deep in the trenches schools. And I don't mean that bad, but like if you go to an inner city school and you hear about things like that, the conditions are even more disparate. But these children are walking around in decent neighborhoods. There is not terror happening everywhere around them. It is happening in a way, though, that we as a community have stopped policing itself, and we keep asking these groups like the mayor or them to do it for us. But again, I go out and speak at all these places, and we have 2 speakers tonight. And I know that's got to be frustrating for you guys as a commission, because your work is important, and the decisions and recommendations you make is important. But that engagement is just as important. I mean, if you guys or anybody, I know as part of the commission you can't come out and make political statements or advocate for certain things at council or other areas, but it is important to where we share that kind of information, where if you guys have that traffic stop numbers quantified like that, if we can make that more public, people would probably be more driven to come out and speak about it, just because that's the kind of pressure that is needed to make those changes. We can't keep relying on you guys to be the only ones making that kind of pressure on them. Because I know it's frustrating to hear all this stuff, and it's like, well, where do we go from here? And I think a lot of it is that our leaders in this community don't actually want those recommendations. Like the police commission, the Citizens Police Commission. I mean, come on. I won't go on about that. The people who are on there know what's wrong with it, but that's what we lead into, though. It takes real effort on their part to listen to us, but we have to force them and give them something to listen to. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, that completes the agenda. Are there any other comments from the commissioners?
Yes, I just want to
Sunshine?
say
Yep.
one thing, since Ken brought up the police review, the Citizens Police Review Commission. There is a meeting on Thursday, open to the public. No one ever knows about them. They're hard to find on the city website, but there is a Community Police Review Commission meeting on Thursday at 5:30, I believe it is, at the at City Council, in the chambers, if anyone is interested.
Okay, thanks. Calvin?
I wanted to know, is the recall for the sheriff petition on the website? Does anyone
I
know?
don't recall. I'm not, I'll check.
Okay, and if it isn't, can we get it on the website?
Yeah, I think we could. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn and a second?
Second.
Okay, we all in favor, aye. Thank you.